Thanks for joining us on this video today. My name's Scott. I'm a member of the engineering team here at MyWorkDrive. I'm joined by my coworker, Jay, also a member of the engineering team. Thanks for joining me today, Jay.
Hello, Scott.
We're going to show you how to set up MyWorkDrive for the very first time today. This assumes that you have a Windows Server 2016 or higher, which is domain joined and doesn't have anything else on it. Those are our recommended specifications. We don't recommend installing on the file server or on the domain controller. There are some caveats there. We have some articles on our help desk that talk about why you wouldn't want to do that or what the considerations are. If you have any questions when we get to the end of this video or, at any point during this video, Jay and I are happy to answer them. support@myworkdrive.com, or you can visit our webpage, MyWorkDrive, and click on the support link to browse our existing articles if you're looking for information, anything like that. If you've never seen MyWorkDrive, if you don't know anything about MyWorkDrive and you're interested in it from a, like I'm interested in purchasing this or I need more information, reach out to our sales team. There's a sales link on our website. I'll show you that here in just a second. And you can reach out to them, get a demo. They'll walk you through all the product features, how to use it. The tools and resources we're going to use today are basically our server setup guide, which is available on our website at myworkdrive.com. Just go to the support page, which is linked up here in the top. And it's one of the first articles on the homepage. In fact, I'll go back and show that to you. It's right here where it says server guide right here on the support link. As I mentioned, you can also get a demo with our sales team, pricing, learn more about us, all those kind of things on our website if you are not familiar with MyWorkDrive. The other tool we're going to use today besides our server support guide, and this really does walk you through, in fact, this video is linked on the guide, but it walks you through all the things you need, and Jay and I are basically going to talk you through that today. And then if you go to myworkdrive.com, click download, it'll take you to the portal page. You do have to log in to download the server software. You do not have to be a paying customer. It's a question that comes up somewhat frequently of, I don't have a license. You don't need a license. In fact, as we go through this trial, I'm going to show you how to get a trial license. Of course, if you already have a license, you could just plug it in. I'll show you that when we get to that spot in the installer. But just sign in, click on the server download, and it'll download the software. Those are really the two tools we're going to use today. As I mentioned, it's a Windows Server 2016, 2019, domain joined. It does have to be on a domain member. MyWorkDrive leverages Active Directory and SMB to make your file shares available to your remote users. We don't keep a user database of all your users. We leverage LDAP and Active Directory. We do not keep your files. You don't have to migrate your files to use MyWorkDrive. They exist on the file server. So domain join so we can connect, and we do require Windows Server. It has all the prerequisites underneath to run all the LDAP connections. Do not want you to run this on Windows 10 or try to do it without a domain. It just doesn't work. It's not what we're designed to do. We have some recommended minimum requirements. We generally recommend multiple cores, minimum of 2 cores. We generally recommend a minimum of 4 gig of RAM. So if you're putting this in to do a small proof of concept, you have a small group of users, infrequent activity, those specs will be fine. As specs grow, if you visit our support page, I'll pull that up again. There's actually in our support, if you just pop over to support or you look through here, there's actually a sizing guide that'll help you understand how much capacity you actually need from a memory and CPU core standpoint. That's going to vary based on your usage, use case, internet connection, number of users, files, and size of files they're accessing. There's a whole number of variables, but generally minimum 2 cores, 4 gig of RAM, which is what this is. MyWorkDrive installs fine on virtual machines or physical machines. Your virtual machine can be on-prem in Hyper-V or in VMware. It can be in the cloud. It can be in Azure or AWS or Google Cloud, anywhere you can host a Windows virtual machine. In this case, we're actually installing it on a virtual machine up in Azure. One final recommendation before we start the install. MyWorkDrive wants to be as close to the domain controller and the file shares as it can, ideally on the same network, not separated by a VPN or frame type connection. We want to mitigate latency because if you think about what I've said so far on the call and how MyWorkDrive works, we're getting the files from the file share. We're querying Active Directory real time when the users want access. The faster we can make that connection to the server, the easier it is to get that information out to the users and the clients. So as I mentioned, we're going to use the server software, which I've already downloaded. It's here. There's no special preparation requirement, no prerequisites. You don't need to install a particular version of .NET or other Windows components. MyWorkDrive server setup will handle all that for you. We're going to be installing version 6.1 today. This is our latest version, which is going into preview. It'll probably be in preview at the point you watch this video. Our current production release is version 6. The install process is the same, whether you're installing 6.0 or 6.1 or even our earlier versions. We haven't significantly changed the install process. It's the software you get that installs that varies just a little bit. Standard terms of service that you're going to agree to it. Backing up your configuration file gives us a backup file, which we'll use if you write in and ask us questions. We can look at the configuration of your server. Are you using an SSO for login? You know, what's the file share paths, things that we typically look at that may occasionally present problems. Also available for us to send to you if you have a disaster and want to recover your configuration data. Remember, we have none of your actual data. We don't have user accounts in AD. We don't have your actual files, so we're not really a backup service, but we would at least have your configuration. We do advise disabling antiviruses prior to proceeding. You saw that little extraction there, and the temp files we write, antivirus applications do block installs. I know people say, oh, I've never had a problem, but we really do see it from time to time. So we are serious. If you're running anything other than Microsoft Windows Defender, please do disable your antivirus. We also have some exclusions we recommend that you put in regarding some of the file paths, and those are all covered in a support article on our website. Actually, this one that's linked right there as recommended on this screen. This is the screen where I mentioned you have the option of either entering a license key, or if you're an existing customer, you're deploying a new instance. If you don't have a key and you want to get one, go ahead and register for one. We'll go ahead and register for one right now. This will take care of the process of communicating with our backend. It does not recognize me as a previous user, so I need to give it a little more information. And it will pull a license key for us and proceed with the install. This is the part I mentioned where we'll occasionally see antivirus stuff on the install, block access to some of the temp folders we use, or block access to the files we extract. So if you are running antivirus, please do disable it prior to starting this process. So the installer is just about wrapped up here. You can see that progress isn't near 100%, updating. Okay, progress completed. This is one thing that's a little bit different from prior server versions. Those of you who maybe have installed MyWorkDrive before or been with us for a while and are watching this as a refresher will notice we no longer strictly require a reboot at the end of the install or recommend a reboot. We'll only prompt a reboot if it's required. Say we install new .NET components or something of that nature. So you could safely exit at this point. We are done with the installer. We can close this Explorer window. And what you'll note is that we have a new icon on the desktop, the MyWorkDrive control panel. If you double click this, it opens up our control panel, which gives you a hyperlink to the login, as well as the ability to collect and send us diagnostic data. We'll occasionally ask you to do this and provide us with your device ID. In the support capacity, if you have an issue with the server, there's information our support team wants to collect from you. Clicking this link will open in your default browser. I would advise against using Internet Explorer just because of the IE enhanced security mode, just a bunch of extra steps to enable all of the functions of a website. So install Edge, Edge Beta, Chrome, your favorite browser, and use that. One note, as I've mentioned a few times, MyWorkDrive doesn't have any user databases. We don't keep track of your users. So who can access the server? How do I log in? Anyone who's a domain admin on the domain that you're joined to and has remote desktop access to the server can log into the MyWorkDrive server. You'll notice that we've been issued a trial license. It's always good to check on this login screen when you first come in that your license is active. If for some reason your license isn't active, it's either expired, your trial expired, you need to get a new license, which you'd reach out to sales for, or you've blocked access to our licensing server. The MyWorkDrive server does check in. You don't, you're not using any resources in the MyWorkDrive world other than an occasional check-in with our licensing server. We're not hosting the server for you. We're not hosting your files. There's no sync and share, any of that nature. So when you first log in, you're going to get stepped through our setup wizard. What's the setup wizard going to do? As you can see from these blocks in the step through here, we're going to add a network share. We're going to configure NTFS users and groups. We're going to make the server publicly available. There's a couple additional options that we'll step through, and then we're finished. At the point we click finish, you have a server available on the internet for your users to connect to with the web client or the remote client. So let's go ahead and step through this real quick. Oh, and if you're coming in, you want to go to advanced mode, you want to manually provision everything, you can skip the wizard. Or if you're installing a new MyWorkDrive server and you want to import an existing configuration from your existing environment, like you're bringing up a second member of a cluster, or you're putting up a DR location, you can go ahead and skip the wizard. But let's not do that. Let's proceed as if you've never set up MyWorkDrive before. We're going to enter a share. The name of the share is whatever you want to call it. It's typically the name that your users would recognize. It's the network share. It's the project share. It's the D drive. It's a name. So we're going to start with ours. We're going to call ours the network share. And the path. Where does this path come from? As you note, it's either going to be a local share on the MyWorkDrive server itself, or it's going to be a public share on an SMB path. We're going to use an SMB path. I always like to go ahead and open Windows Explorer and browse to it in Windows Explorer so I can be sure I've got the name correct. Here you can see it's autocomplete is finding it on our network. Here's our sample network share. So I just want to go ahead and copy this path, paste it in here, and we want to retain the import existing users and groups from selected path. That's really important. We're going to import your NTFS permissions and allow you to make adjustments to secure it more than what you have on regular network SMB if you want to. I'll explain that here in the next page. So let's go ahead and click next. And of course, you can change all this later. This is just our easy wizard. You'll have the ability to add other shares, delete and re-add this share if you make an error in the name or something, all of that once we complete the wizard through the shares link here. So we're now importing from NTFS. This is validating what MyWorkDrive has access to. This is again why we need to be on a domain joined server, because we're actually querying SMB. You'll see a progress bar here at the top in blue as it queries. This process can take a little while if you have a large domain or a lot of groups. Okay, so this is everything SMB sees about access to this share. These are the users, obviously domain users, domain admins, and then we have some custom groups in here, a guest group and local machine groups. You can delete from this list. If I said, via MyWorkDrive, I really don't want local machine users and administrators having access. I don't want this guest group having access. I don't know what this custom group is. I really only want domain users and domain admins. So you saw me remove them. Of course, I can go in and edit and put those back if I want to, but let's leave it like this for now. Over here, you'll notice the client options. We've got our web client, our MapDrive clients for Mac OS and Windows, and our mobile client for iOS and Android. If you want to, this is what we call our granular permissions. This was actually new in version 6 and it's unchanged in 6.1. If you want to adjust what clients are available to what domain groups, you can make those changes here. So if I wanted domain users to not have access via the mobile client, simply uncheck it. And again, you can change all this stuff later. You don't need to make any changes in the wizard. We'll go ahead and leave it as is, and we'll go ahead and step to the next step, which is making the server available via publicly available. There are a number of ways. Let me stop here and I'll give you a little backstory. There are a number of ways you can make this server available on the internet. We have a built-in tool using reverse proxy through Cloudflare we call the Cloud Web Connector. This gives your server a site on our hostname of myworkdrive.net without opening any inbound ports through your firewall, configuring any SSL certificates or anything like that. It's a reverse proxy connecting outbound through Cloudflare's Argo tunnel service on port 7844. So you do have to have port 7844 outbound open, nothing inbound. And so that's what we're going to do here. And I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. You get to pick your site name. Of course, it's like any other picking a host name on a subfolder. If it's already taken, like you probably couldn't get file share or drives or share or something like that because it would already be taken, but it'll warn you if you do that. I don't believe my WorkDrive demo is taken, but if it is, we'll find out here in a moment. And you're going to put your email address in here. The purpose of this email is to notify you when this has been provisioned. The setup of the reverse proxy can take a few minutes. We don't want to make you sit on this screen and keep clicking refresh. We'll send you an email when it's ready. Typically, this process just takes moments. Office 365 Online Edit is enabling the ability to directly connect to Office 365 from the MyWorkDrive web client and gives your users the ability to natively edit files online as if they were in SharePoint or a SharePoint-like experience directly from MyWorkDrive. I'm going to leave that on because I'll show you how that works here in a few minutes as soon as we log in. If you're not an Office 365 customer, if you don't have Office 365 E1, E3 type licenses, you can safely turn this off. It doesn't hurt your users' ability to access the files. They just won't be able to directly link to Office 365 from the web client. And of course, as I keep repeating myself, you can change this later. So if you don't want it on for your tests or you don't know if you're going to use it, turn it on, turn it off, change it later. It doesn't matter. As I mentioned, when you set up public access, one of the options, the one that we've chosen as we're going through this, is a host name on the Cloud Web Connector on mywordrive.net using the Cloudflare Argo Tunnel Reverse Proxy. Other ways you could set this up include a direct inbound connection on port 80 or port 443 using an SSL certificate, or with your own reverse proxy. Far and away, the most common is a direct inbound connection using port 443 or the Cloud Web Connector. Let's go on to next, and we'll hit just a couple things to wrap up. If you are using home directories provisioned in Active Directory and you want to include them and make them available via MyWorkDrive, we have a built-in tool to do that. If you're not provisioning home directories via Active Directory, the user's profile, or you don't want their home drives available, you can turn them off. I'll leave this on and show you what that looks like when we log into the client here in a moment. I talked about Cloudflare's file size limit. You can set your own file size limit. This is not as common as it used to be. When internet connections were not as fast, it used to be a little bit more common to want to set file size limits to mitigate user load. You just didn't want anybody uploading or downloading really large files. Not as common to set this anymore, but if you turned it on, you'd see you have the ability to set a file size limit, and you have a separate limit for the map drive. So if you want to set a separate limit for the install map drive client versus the web client and mobile, you can do that. I'm going to leave these just by default. Of course, I feel redundant, but as I've said 100 times, you can change those later. Let's go ahead and finish. Note that it says success. We can go to the admin panel. As I promised you earlier, your server with the network share that we provisioned is now available for users to access via the host name we picked, in this case, MyWorkDrive demo.myworkdrive.net. Shares is the default place where all of your shares are managed. Let's click over to settings and we'll just look at that host name briefly. This is where I mentioned it's already provisioned, but if this was going to take a few minutes because things were busy, we would just send you an email to let you know that it was not ready yet. Or I'm sorry, we would send you a note when it's ready, not that it's not ready yet. You can see that we're up and running. And this is where, if I wanted to turn that off later, if I set up my own direct inbound connection, or as I mentioned, if we had Office 365, we could turn it on or off. But let's step back to shares. We'll go through these in line. As I mentioned, you can make changes to this now. So I can click into this and edit it. If I need to make adjustments to those groups, remember we pared down some groups, I can re-import. This is a new feature in 6.1, the ability to basically refresh your NTFS permissions. An important note here. You can go ahead and edit and make changes. If you pop open edit, it gives you the ability to search your domain. So if I just wanted to search for myself, you can see I've got a list of like like Active Directory users and groups, we trim the number we show by default. You can search for things that don't show up in the list. I can go ahead and make changes here. I select someone, I can add them to permissions, but what this doesn't do, this doesn't override your NTFS permissions. So if I was to do this and say, I've manually added this MSFTO4528 user, that doesn't give them permission unless they actually have under permission in NTFS and underlying permissions because they were a member of the domain users group or a member of one of those groups I deleted. Okay. You use this window not to add things to NTFS, but you use them to actually trim this to make it more secure. The idea being if you have people accessing MyWorkDrive remotely, you may want them to have less access or you may want fewer people to have access remotely than would have on-premise using their local native shares in the office. So let's not make that change. So actually make no change to this. There are multiple options for drive letters here. If you want MyWorkDrive, the client, to pick a drive letter for you, leave this blank. That lets the user pick the drive letter they want to mount their shares on. And this is good in a scenario where the user may have existing drive letters that you don't want to conflict with. But if you want to give users that in-office like native experience, you'll probably toggle drive letters on and you'll set specific drive letters to give them when they use the MapDrive client. So in this case, our home folders are always on U, our network share is always on N. Now when they log in, they're actually going to get those drive letters. So let's go ahead and save. Now let's say I want to add another share that was not available through the wizard, but I know I also want to add the share in addition to network share. Again, I like to pop open Windows Explorer and just make sure that I have the right syntax. Obviously, if you're comfortable with your share, you can just type in here. So here's a second share. Go ahead and do that import, pull in all of our NTFS permissions just like last time. Note the blue progress bars that you'll see at the top of the window here. As I mentioned, if your directory is large, you have a lot of events on it, you have multiple domain controllers, all that kind of fun stuff. This process can take a little bit longer. There you go. In this case, I'm not going to make any changes to my share permissions. I'm just going to go ahead and accept them. And I need to give this a drive letter. Put this on S. Remember to save. Okay, so now when my users log in, we actually have 2 drive letters. Let's actually show you that user experience real quick before we finish stepping through administration. So if I go to MyWorkDrive demo, .myworkdrive.net, you'll see the login screen for my server. You'll notice that we have a file size limit. I mentioned that we were going to display a file size limit. Again, you'll notice that it tells you it's licensed, it's trial. You can adjust a lot of these things, the logos, the colors. I'll talk about that here in a few minutes. Now, how do my users log in? I know I'm kind of getting redundant here, but we don't keep a database of users. Who can log in? Users who have Active Directory accounts are members of the domain, and this uses their domain login. So much like you saw a moment ago, I logged in with my username. In this case, I'm going to log in with Samantha. Samantha is an example user in our accounting team. You'll see that it loads. And you'll see that Samantha got her home folder. I mentioned that we use the home folders. Samantha has some example files in her home folder. She also has the network share. We made no changes there. Samantha's a member of domain users. We left domain users. So here's all the files on the network share. And of course, that second share we added after the fact has a different set of files in it. Just wanted to show you the Office 365 integration. I left Office 365 on. So if I click on an Office document, you'll notice I have multiple options. I have Edit Online. I also have Edit. Edit Online is going to do that Office 365 option. Edit is going to attempt to edit it locally in installed Word. If you don't have that functionality, you can turn it off. I'll show you that here in just a moment. But let's just pop this file open in Office Online. Here we've gone to Office 365 because I enabled it through the browser, and I'm now in Office 365. Office 365 loads as a default in the preview view. I would go ahead and click Edit, and it would prompt me to log in. Now, this is a good point. Users do have to have Office 365 licenses in order to edit in Office 365. So this isn't This isn't giving you a license that you don't already have. It's not like a workaround to get around Office 365 licensing, but Samantha in this case would just sign into her Office 365 account. She'd be able to edit this document. So let's step back to the server software. Let's finish walking through that. I'll show you a few more things here with this. I'm gonna go ahead and close out of Samantha's session. In settings, there are a lot of settings here. I'm not going to talk about all of them. I'm going to refer back to our server setup guide, which steps you through. We've now logged into the admin portal. We've set up shares. We've made it available on the web. Standard features and settings is basically the section I'm at now. I'm going to talk you through a few things in server. You should refer back to the setup guide for complete details. As I mentioned, if you want to turn Office 365 off, you want to turn that local web edit off, you can do that. With Office 365 and local on, you have an option of what you want to happen in the web client. If you set up a direct inbound connection with IIS and 443 and you want to require SSL, which we would strongly recommend, you can toggle that on. That way, if you have port 80 mapped in addition to 443, the server will automatically push you over to 443. The clients can be enabled and disabled. So if I don't want to use the web client, I don't want to use the MapDrive client, I don't want to use the mobile client, or you want to set features within them, you can do that here. Just turn them on and off. WebDAV causes a lot of confusion, and this really should be off by default. We don't use WebDAV as for our clients. You're not accessing the server via WebDAV. For those of you familiar with WebDAV, you'll say, oh, this is WebDAV. It's not. The server has the ability to act as a WebDAV server so that clients that do use WebDAV, like PDF Expert or older multifunction machines, things of that nature, we can take connections from them, but we're not requiring WebDAV. I always recommend everyone turn that off anyway. OneDrive and Outlook sharing are connecting to the OneDrive and Outlook APIs in the web client. These are web client specific features. They actually allow you to move files off of the share. So if you don't want your users to do that, you can turn these off. But that facilitates the easy access of sharing with others, sharing with OneDrive, loading a file into Outlook and emailing an attachment, that kind of thing. If you turn these off, users can still download the file and manually attach it to an Outlook email or upload it, unless you enable DLP, which we'll talk about in a moment. I should mention that a lot of our things have tooltips. You highlight over them. You get to read about the function that goes on there. There's some branding. There's much more branding over here in Enterprise. I'll show you in a minute, but you'll probably want to adjust your company name. Again, the option to turn home directories on and off, those size limits we saw on the other screen. And down here at the bottom is something I want to talk about briefly, which is timeouts. This causes a little bit of confusion at times. These are absolute timeouts, and they relate to basically your login source. Private computer, public computer being on the web client, the MapDrive client, the mobile client, and some things around searching in the web client when you enable search and zip files, if you allow your users to operate on zip files. As I mentioned, these are absolute timeouts. They're not idle timeouts. So if I'm on a private computer and I log into the web client, I am logged in for 7,200 minutes. At 7,200 minutes and 1 second, I will be logged out and prompted to log back in. 7,200 minutes being a typical work week. We took these mirroring the functionality in Office 365. So you may choose to change these. You may find these to be too long or too short for your environment. It's entirely up to you what you want to adjust any of these to, but just be aware they're absolute timeouts. They're not idle timeouts. So this doesn't mean if you went in here and put 30 minutes thinking, oh, well, they'll just be logged out after they're idle for 30 minutes. No, every 30 minutes, the user will be prompted to log back in. Of course, we made changes on this page, so let's go ahead and save them. I believe I disabled WebDAV. Enterprise features are more around advanced features. You see here SSO, multi-factor, DLP, and of course the branding I mentioned that there was more of on the other screen. You can use an SSO to facilitate user logins to MyWorkDrive. You get all the benefits you used to and expect from an SSO, including not have to log in if you already have an active session, being able to link a login off of a portal, all of those things. We have a number of built-in profiles already, ADFS, Azure, Okta One Login, You can also manually configure your SSO. You can drop in a metadata URL, or you can edit the config files. We have documentation on that. If you take a look at our documentation, lots of clients have used things, RSA, ping identity, IBM, all kinds of different SSOs. So you can set that up. Two-factor isn't something that gets used as often as it used to. Our two-factor is a built-in implementation of Duo. So if you're using Duo and you want to drop Duo in here, but what most people are doing is putting their two-factor into their SSO. So if you're using Azure AD, for example, and you've included Microsoft Authenticator with a push, or you've included the text message or another second factor or multi-factor, what you do over there has no bearing on MyWorkDrive. The SSO will walk them through whatever their login process is, including if you're using Azure, you could have something like pre-auth. You can have conditional access to require specific devices. And at the end, if they've completed the challenge and they're authenticated, it will pass back to MyWorkDrive and say, yes, Samantha can log into MyWorkDrive, and we get a token. So you do need to configure delegation on Active Directory for your MyWorkDrive server. And I'm not going to go through that in this video, but there are notes about that in the server setup guide, also when configuring your SSO. And we have guides for all of these SSOs. So if you need help stepping through Azure Octo One login, we actually have profiles in the, for lack of a better term, in the stores or the directories. If you go to their configured applications, we exist in all of those. And traditional ADFS, you can set it up with your ADFS server. DLP is our built-in data leak prevention. This actually gets a significant improvement in version 6.1 with the ability for DLP to exist on our MapDrive clients, our installed MapDrive clients for Windows and Mac OS. Previously, DLP was only available for the web and mobile. We've now extended that to the MapDrives. What does DLP do? Briefly, DLP allows you to remove access to the document from a clipboard and copy and paste and download so users can view it in our online viewer. They can interact with it. They can see it, but it's watermarked, as you note, the watermark options here, and they can get to it in Office 365, which adds that level of security around not allowing save as or download or copy paste clipboard type of things. So they can operate with the files, but they can't remove them from the environment. You've protected them. When you enable DLP, I'm actually going to step back to shares right now because I want to show you a feature in shares. When you enable DLP, what you'll notice is, if you remember earlier, we didn't have these radio buttons for download in Office Online, and we didn't have these extra columns and granular permissions for Office Online editing and download. This is what happens when you enable DLP. And essentially, when you prohibit downloads, you've now put the share in DLP mode. So in this scenario, our users can't even edit in Office Online. Even though we turned it on, we didn't grant it permission to any of these, because you can do that granularly. I can give admins the ability to edit in Office Online, but not domain user members. This is that environment that I mentioned a moment ago, where when you have set it up like this, when a domain user like Samantha logs in, she'll be able to see the files. She'll be able to open them in an online editor. She will not even be able to open them in Office 365, although I could as a domain admin, Jay could as a domain admin. And you have that extra level of security that the documents cannot be removed from the environment. Let me actually show you that, how that works. I'm going to log back into Samantha. Note that you get some warnings up here about requiring the 6.1 MapDrive client. As I mentioned, we are introducing DLP for the MapDrive clients with our 6.1 version. So let's log in just real quick as Samantha again. So now when Samantha logs in, note that the user has disabled downloads on network share. That's the share we put in DLP mode. So if I go to regular share, I still have full access to everything. So network share is now in DLP mode, which means I no longer have download. Note that the list of items over here has changed. If I right click on this file, download is not an option. I do have the view online option. And when I go to view it, it goes into our viewer because we've disabled Office 365, and you get a watermark. and you get a date and timestamp of when Samantha looked at this file. And of course, I have access to the file and its contents, but it's secured. There's no clipboard, there's no download, so there's no save as. This file is protected. So Samantha is able to work with the file, but you can't actually remove it from the environment. That's our DLP functionality. And this now all exists in the MapDrive client as well. Of course, I'm just showing you the web client because that's easy. So let's step back to our enterprise settings. That's our DLP feature. Branding allows you to brand the web, primarily the web client, but of course, some of these messages down here and custom messages also do apply to the install clients on the MapDrive and mobile. The install clients tend to take their colors from the theme that you choose, dark mode, or if you change your color theme in Windows, it'll alter these codes. But these all apply to the web client. Where to get your download, where to go for help. You can redirect those things to your own support pages. You can put a, this is supposed to be a URL, but I've seen people put phone numbers in here, that sort of thing. A couple more things we'll touch on real quick. Alerts is our built-in alerting feature, which sends you an email when users exceed thresholds for certain events. If a user downloads too many files in a certain period of time, and you can adjust this. I could make this, one file in I believe 5 minutes is the lowest interval you can go. But you can trim these down. Of course, it is an email. As you see down here, we're configuring our SMTP host. And lots of us don't want to get a bunch more emails again. So if you're using another SIM product or another monitoring product, Elk, Splunk, Sumo, Logarithm, any of those things, the logs that our server keeps for access of the files are written as text and XML. They're on the file system. You can set up a log aggregator in your log reader, point it at this machine, have the client pull the logs in, and you can real-time monitor user activity and do your own reporting, charting, whatever you want. So you don't need to use our alerts. But if you don't have a SIM already online, you're not currently monitoring user activity, and you want to do some rudimentary monitoring, alerts are here. As I mentioned, we have a log, we have a viewer of our logs, which are kept on the file system. And you can see I've been logging in with the user Samantha. I've been looking at a number of photos and directories, things I've opened, paths I browse, that sort of thing. Then all gets tracked here. So you can filter this if you're looking for particular user activity. You can see our logins. When we log in from clients, you actually get login, client, and version. So you know where your users are logging in from and what they're doing. And of course, the wizard, no need to ever go back to that, but it is basically that wizard we stepped through. One last thing I want to show you, which is the configuration of a direct connection on an IIS, because there can be some question and confusion around how to accomplish that. But first, I want to ask my coworker, Jay, if there's anything else you think in the server settings I should have covered or that we missed.
We're good. Covered most of the important topics.
Of course, as I mentioned, there is even more in both the server setting guide as you get into the details of this, as well as all of the other support articles. As you saw in that left margin, there are lots of support articles. There's also a search at the top of the page. We talked about the fact that we have a guide for Azure AD and all of our SSOs. So if you were to search for that, you would see it would give you a number of things, not only setting up that at Azure AD SAML configuration, but also security settings, domain accounts, granular permissions, etc. So one last thing to show you outside of MyWorkDrive. MyWorkDrive does host a number of sites in IIS. This is one of the reasons why we generally recommend that you install MyWorkDrive on a clean machine. We don't want to conflict with any existing websites that are running on the machine. You don't need to pre-install IIS, as I mentioned before we started the install. We take care of all the prerequisites. If IIS is not on the machine, we'll add it for you. There are 3 sites added: the admin dashboard, the WCF service, which is how we intercommunicate with the different tools in the server, and also the web client. These have bindings on them out of the box. If you take a look at bindings, please do not make changes to these bindings. These bindings need to be here for the server to operate correctly in itself. Please don't remove the stock bindings. One of the popular options for making the MyWorkDrive server software available remotely is to set up a direct connection on HTTPS with port 443. And if you were to want to do that, you would want to edit the web bindings to add your 443 binding. Of course, you would also need to add the appropriate SSL certificate. MyWorkDrive doesn't work with self-signed certificates. So you'll notice we do create our own self-signed certificate for interoperating with SSOs. We pre-stage that. So if you set up an SSO, it's there. But to make the web client available remotely, you're going to want to apply your own commercially sourced certificate. You can buy that from any number of sources on the internet. You can use the free commercially sourced certificates issued by organizations like Let's Encrypt if you want to install one of those. But essentially, you would go ahead and add that to the server certificates. And then once added as a server certificate, you would set that as a binding on 443 and IIS. Please do not remove the 8357. That's critical to operation of the MyWorkDrive server. If you want help with that, there is actually a complete walkthrough of binding your own IIS certificate on our website. You can just simply search for SSL certificate and you'll get our article, Steps to Bind and Install Your Own SSL Certificate, which walks you through the process once you have an SSL certificate of adding it to server certificates, as I noted just a moment ago, and then editing the bindings to add it. That can be wildcard certificate. So if you have a wildcard cert, you can certainly use that as well. Just if you go to the SSL certificate, don't forget you have to set a host record in DNS and open your firewall and map port 443 through the firewall to the MyWorkDrive server. So there you have it. You have a completely up and running, functioning MyWorkDrive server, which you can make your data shares available remotely to users via our web client, our MapDrive client, or our mobile client. Comments, questions, things I missed, Jay, before we wrap this up?
This is great. We covered pretty much all the basics and other features of MyWorkDrive.
Excellent. From here, 3 things to remind you of. 1, you get the server software by signing in at our portal. Just go to download, click on server software. When you get logged in, click on the download server software link. That'll get you the installer that you need. You don't have to have a license beforehand. You can sign up for a trial as you go through the process. That's number 1. Number 2, if you have never seen the product before, you want to get a demo with our sales team, click the 15-minute demo link, check out the free trial, take a look at our pricing and how it works. We are more than happy to step you through all the features. Jay and I touched on just a few of them, showing you how to get a server up and running. There are many more specific. We have a lot of experience in specific industries and verticals. If you're in education or healthcare, government, industry, secure environments, those kind of things, we could certainly talk you through and help you with that. My final comment, if you need help, pop over to the support page. You've seen me operating in our support section over here. As you've noted, we have literally hundreds of articles that the engineering team, our product team, our co-founder has written to talk about how to configure MyWorkDrive, different scenarios, different things you'll run into. So certainly leverage our existing documentation, or if you just simply need help, from the support page, you can click on submit a ticket with our help desk protocol or pop us an email, support@myworkdrive.com. It's been my pleasure to show you the product, how to get it up and running. Thank you for joining me, Jay. And we look forward to seeing you as a client and helping you on your way.